The exact instant the camera battery gave out, the screen went black, taking with it the image of a primal horror that should never have been captured. For 13 agonizing seconds, just 13 seconds of footage, what appeared before the lens was something so ancient and malevolent, it defied human comprehension. A glimpse of pure terror before the deafening silence and encroaching darkness swallowed everything. Those final moments, filled with sharp claws tearing at the air and glowing red eyes in the forest's gloom, weren't etched into John's memory as a recollection, but as an open wound, pulsing with the dread of what was to come after the last thread of hope snapped and the truth revealed itself in all its brutality. John's nightmare, however, didn't begin there. It started much earlier, when curiosity and skepticism led him and two friends deep into the forgotten reaches of the Appalachian Mountains, on a journey that would seal their fates forever at the remote and abandoned Shadowbrook Farm. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more chilling tales. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. The night air at Shadowbrook Farm was heavy, laden not just with the damp scent of earth and dead leaves, but with an oppressive stillness that seemed to smother even one's thoughts. John, a restless soul and paranormal enthusiast, felt a chilling shiver run down his spine, and it wasn't just the late autumn cold. He and his friends, Mark and Sarah, had traveled for days to reach that isolated spot, driven by whispered rumors and ancient legends that circulated through the small, 50-mile distant town of Darkwater Creek. The farm, abandoned for decades, was the epicenter of these tales, a place where, the old-timers said, the moon wept blood and shadows had teeth. On their first day, with the sun still high, the decaying architecture of the old manor house seemed like perfect fodder for urban exploration videos. But as twilight approached, a different aura took hold. The chirping of crickets became irregular, and the wind, which once sounded like a distant lament, now seemed to whisper forgotten names. John adjusted his professional camera lens, seeking the perfect angle of a dilapidated barn, but his fingers trembled slightly. Sarah, always the most skeptical, scoffed at local superstitions, yet he noticed the way she hunched her shoulders at a snap coming from the dense woods surrounding the property. Mark, the most pragmatic of the trio, checked their camping gear with a keener eye than usual, as if searching for more than just mosquitoes. The farm wasn't just old, it seemed to wait for them. And the expectation in the air, more than any legend, was what truly began to disturb John. He recalled the warnings of old Ben in Darkwater Creek's only General Stoa. "That farm don't take kindly to visitors, son. The night there has eyes." John had laughed at the time, but now, under the imposing shadows of ancient trees, the eyes of the night seemed to be everywhere, watching their every move, every breath, every silence. The adventure they sought was transforming into something far darker, a prelude to a terror even their boldest minds couldn't conceive. The silence, then, was broken by a distant howl. It wasn't a dog. It was something different, primitive and full of brutal melancholy that made John's skin tingle. Mark and Sarah's eyes widened, fixed in the direction from which the sound had come. No one spoke a word, but the message was clear. They were in trouble. That inaugural night's howl echoed in John's mind long after it had faded into the air. He and his friends tried to rationalize it, attributing the sound to some unusual wild animal or even a distorted echo of the wind. But the sense that something fundamentally wrong lurked in those lands persisted. The following days were marked by a series of small incidents that, isolated, could be dismissed, but together formed a disturbing mosaic. Their electronic equipment began to fail without apparent reason. Mark's drone, which once flew with precision, exhibited intermittent failures in image transmission, capturing only static or flashes of indistinct shapes in the dense woods. Portable radios crackled with inaudible voices, guttural sounds that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. Sarah, who always slept soundly, began waking up in the middle of the night, swearing she heard dragging footsteps outside their tent. She described a tall, shapeless shadow that for a brief second obscured the moonlight through the thin tent fabric before vanishing. John, meanwhile, felt constantly observed. The forest, once merely a frame for the farm, now seemed to have a life of its own, its twisted branches forming grotesque faces, its leaves whispering secrets in an ancient tongue. They tried to explore the farm's surroundings, but every attempt to enter the woods was frustrated by a growing sense of dread. The air grew thicker, visibility decreased, and the vegetation became almost impassable, as if the forest did not want to reveal its secrets. One afternoon, as John was trying to fix one of the trail cameras they had installed, he found something strange. A trail of gigantic and unusually shaped footprints, which did not seem to belong to any known North American animal. They were deep, marking the damp soil with the force of an enormous weight, and displayed long, sharp claws. John's heart pounded. He called Mark and Sarah, but the footprints abruptly disappeared a few yards from where he found them, as if the creature had simply evaporated into the air. Sarah's skepticism began to crack, and even Mark, the most rational, showed increasing nervousness. "This isn't normal, John," Mark muttered, his voice low, observing the mark on the ground with a mixture of fascination and fear. Something is seriously wrong here. Night fell once more, and with it, a silence even deeper than before. The howl they had heard on the first night seemed like a friendly warning compared to the oppressive silence that now enveloped the farm. John felt a chill. He knew something awaited them in the darkness, something with claws and eyes that watched from afar, and that the creature's patience was coming to an end. The tension at Shadowbrook Farm was almost palpable, as dense as the fog that formed at dawn. John, Mark, and Sarah no longer slept soundly. Nights were filled with strange noises, whispers that seemed to come from all directions, and the persistent feeling of being hunted. Sarah, frightened, suggested leaving, but John, driven by an obsession he couldn't explain, insisted on staying. He needed to find out what it was, what caused such fear and mystery. The next morning, while searching the edge of the forest, they found an opening. It wasn't a natural cave, but a kind of irregular hole in the ground, hidden beneath the twisted roots of a colossal tree, almost as if the earth had been torn open. The air emanating from it was thick and foul, with a smell reminiscent of decaying flesh and sulfur. Mark, reluctant, lit his most powerful flashlight. The beam of light revealed a dark den extending deep into the earth. The walls were damp and uneven, and there were claw marks scratching the rock. Small boned fragments and dark fur were scattered on the muddy floor. A shiver ran down John's spine. This was not the work of a common animal. It was large, strong, and most terrifyingly intelligent enough to hide its lair. Against all of Sarah's objections and Mark's visible apprehension, John felt an irresistible force pulling him inside. He was convinced that there he would find the answers, whatever lurked in the shadows. Sarah remained at the entrance, visibly disturbed, while Mark, with a sigh of resignation, followed him. As they delved deeper into the damp darkness, the sound of their own hearts pounding in their ears was the only melody. The smell grew more intense, and with each step, the environment became more claustrophobic and oppressive. The flashlight's beam then revealed something that chilled John's blood, a kind of rudimentary altar built of stacked stones, and upon it, an ancient object, a dark wooden amulet with carved symbols that seemed to exude a palpable, sinister energy. Around the altar, there were more bones, some clearly human. It was then they heard it. A low growl, almost a hiss, coming from an even deeper opening. It wasn't an animal sound. It was a warning, a threat. Mark's flashlight began to flicker, weakening. Fear paralyzed John. He knew they had gone too far, that they had disturbed something far older and more dangerous than they could imagine. The growl reverberated through the damp den, filling the small space with a visceral vibration that made John's hair stand on end. Mark, in a panic, tried to pull him back, but John was petrified, his eyes fixed on the wooden amulet on the stone altar. There was something about it, a morbid attraction, that prevented him from looking away. Sarah, outside, screamed Mark's name with desperate urgency. The sound of branches breaking and a series of heavy grunts followed, indicating she was under attack. The growl inside the den intensified, turning into a guttural, bestial roar. Mark's flashlight failed completely, plunging them into almost total darkness, broken only by intermittent flashes from John's small headlamp. In the midst of the chaos, John reached out and, in an insane impulse, grabbed the amulet. The moment his fingers touched the cold, ancient wood, a shock wave coursed through his body. An ancient tribe in a bloody ritual. Sacrifices under a red moon. The agonizing transformation of a man into a horrifying beast. He felt the weight of the curse, the history of that creature, the pain and fury emanating from the object. The amulet seemed alive, pulsing in his hand, and the carved symbols seemed to dance in the gloom. It was then that he saw it. Two red lights, like glowing embers, emerged from the deepest darkness of the den, followed by an immense, shapeless silhouette that moved with terrifying agility. It was the creature of legends, the werewolf in all its terribly real glory. The air in the den grew dense, and the foul smell intensified, mingled with a metallic odor of fresh blood. Mark let out a muffled cry. John knew he was reacting to what they saw, to the sight of the beast materializing before them. Time seemed to slow, and for a fleeting instant, John saw the creature's face, a grotesque mixture of human and lupine features, with sharp fangs dripping saliva and eyes filled with insatiable hunger. The creature did not attack immediately. It watched them, like a predator assessing its prey, and an even more disturbing sound, a hoarse hiss, emerged from its throat. It was not an animal sound. It was something that resembled an attempt at speech, a horrendous distortion of human language. The sight was so shocking that John's mind refused to process it. He could barely breathe, his heart pounding against his ribs, the amulet clutched in his hand. He knew he had invoked something far beyond his control, and that the real terror was just beginning. Shadowbrook Farm was not just a haunted place. It was a portal, a nest of something ancient and hungry. The werewolf's hoarse hiss paralyzed John and Mark. It wasn't a roar, but a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of reality, an agonizing attempt at communication that only amplified the creature's horror. Its red eyes locked onto John, and an icy dread enveloped him. The creature took a step forward, its claws scraping the rocky floor of the den, and the sound was deafening, like rending metal. At that moment, Sarah's desperate scream echoed once more from outside, muffled and then abruptly cut short. That sound acted as a catalyst for Mark. He, who had been petrified, let out a cry of despair and rage, pushing John aside and rushing towards the den's exit, brandishing a camping pole he had brought. "Sarah!" he yelled, his voice thick with panic. The werewolf, with surprising speed for its colossal size, spun and lunged at Mark. The blow from the pole was useless, bouncing off the creature's body as if it were rubber. John heard a dry crack, followed by Mark's piercing scream that was silenced in a blink of an eye. The image became a blur of fury and darkness, with the beast tearing his friend apart with terrifying ease. The smell of fresh blood filled the den, nauseating, and John felt his stomach churn. He could do nothing, completely immobilized by shock and terror. With Mark out of its way, the creature turned its attention back to John, its incandescent eyes fixed on him. The amulet in his hand pulsed with a cold energy, and John realized the beast seemed to hesitate, as if the object bothered or repelled it in some way. But the hesitation lasted only an instant. The hunger in its eyes was more powerful than any reluctance. The beast advanced again, its body covered in dense, strong fur, its fangs bared. John, with a primal reflex, raised the camera he still held. Not to film, but as a desperate attempt at defense, a final and pathetic gesture of defiance against the inevitable. The camera lens captured the reflection of the creature's red eyes, the outline of its colossal body, and its claws poised to deliver the final blow. It was then that the battery died. 13 seconds of terror recorded before the darkness swallowed everything. The instant the camera screen went black, a deafening roar erupted from the creature. Total darkness descended upon John, and he felt the impact. It wasn't a direct attack, but a wave of air, a brutal pressure that hurled him against the damp walls of the den. The amulet slipped from his hand, falling to the ground with a dull thud, and at the same moment, pain shot through his body. He felt the warmth of blood trickling, but there were no claws, just a blind, powerful blow that left him stunned and almost unconscious. He was gravely injured, but alive. Amidst the chaos, John, with blurred vision and heavy breathing, groped the muddy ground for the amulet. He knew that object was the key, the link to the creature. His hands brushed against bones and damp earth before finding the cold, ancient wood. As he held it again, a new wave of images flooded his mind, clearer and more terrifying than before. He saw the origin of the curse, the betrayed shaman who had transformed into the first beast, seeking revenge against those who had cast him out of his lands. The curse had passed down through generations, tied to the land and the amulet, which imprisoned the werewolf's soul but also granted it power. And now John, by touching the amulet, had bound himself to it. He felt the creature's presence recede, an aura of anger and confusion emanating from it. The beast didn't flee, but seemed disturbed by the connection John had unintentionally forged. Gradually, a faint light began to appear from the den's entrance, indicating that night was giving way to dawn. The creature, sensitive to sunlight, let out a roar of frustration and vanished into the deepest, darkest parts of the den, seeking its daytime refuge. John remained there, alone, amidst the smell of blood and excruciating pain. The images of Mark and Sarah, their screams, the brutality of their deaths, would haunt his mind forever. The insane curiosity, the obsession to unravel the mystery of Shadowbrook Farm had exacted a terrible price. He had found the truth, but at what cost? The rising sun cast weak rays over the den's entrance, revealing a trail of destruction. He was wounded, his body aching, but the worst was yet to come. He knew the connection with the amulet was not a shield, but a sentence. The curse was now a part of him, and the beast, though temporarily driven away, would return. He was now the next chapter in the macabre story of Shadowbrook Farm, a man marked by the beast, carrying a dark secret within his very being. The curse was no longer just on the farm, it was inside him. John emerged from the den at dawn, wounded and stumbling, carrying the amulet like a heavy burden. The sun, once his enemy, now felt like a cruel relief, illuminating the scene of tragedy. Mark and Sarah's bodies were not visible, dragged into the forest by the creature, but the marks on the ground and the persistent smell of blood were undeniable evidence of the horror that had transpired. The farm, under the morning light, seemed even darker, as if the very earth had absorbed the night's terror. John knew he couldn't stay there. He needed to flee, but where to? The amulet's curse followed him, an invisible shadow, a constant presence whispering in his mind. He now held a terrible knowledge, an understanding of the cycle of violence and transformation that linked the beast to those lands. He was the most recent link, an observer who became a participant, and now, perhaps, the next victim. With each painful step, John moved away from Shadowbrook Farm, but the farm and its legacy did not move away from him. The memory of the 13 seconds of footage, the exact moment the camera failed and the creature revealed itself, was a constant nightmare. He didn't get the full video, but he had something far more terrifying, the living experience, the touch of the curse. He knew the beast would return, driven by the amulet and the new connection that had been formed. With each full moon night, the creature's presence would grow stronger, the amulet's pull more irresistible. John was condemned to an existence of constant vigilance, fear, and an internal battle against the darkness that now inhabited his very being. He had survived the night at Shadowbrook Farm, but the true terror was just beginning, a legacy he would carry until the end of his days. He had to warn the world, but who would believe his story, coming from a man who carried the mark of a werewolf in his soul? The amulet burned in his hand, a silent promise of a dark future, of sleepless nights and an eternal struggle against the evil he had inadvertently unleashed. Shadowbrook Farm, with its poetic name and bloody history, had claimed yet another soul, transforming John's life into an endless horror story, where the monster was not just what lurked in the darkness, but also what he felt awakening within himself. John's journey was now a constant flight, a race against time and against his own nature, which, little by little, was beginning to bend to the shadow of the broken moon. The camera failed, but John's story was just beginning, etched not on tape, but into every fiber of his being, a living testament to the horror that dwells beyond human comprehension. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more chilling tales of haunted places and cryptid encounters. Share your theories about what truly happened to John in the comments below. Thanks for watching.